Welcome to Bursting Through, the storytelling movement where love, compassion, and empathy take center stage. I'm Steve Peterson. Our conversations will shine light on real stories of allyship, the moments where people choose connection over division, courage over silence, and love over fear. Today's guest is Shanti Joy Cole, a certified coach, longtime sales leader, podcast host, and founder of Grow With Her Pro Consulting. After more than 2 decades of media sales, she discovered that people thrive most in environments rooted in authenticity, trust, accountability, and joy. Her coaching journey strengthened her belief that while life's twists are inevitable, how we respond is always within our control. When she follows her inner compass, alignment and success naturally follow. She knows how she now helps others follow that same alignment. Through Go With Her Pro and her podcast, Stories We Haven't Shared, a campfire style series exploring the hidden layers underrepresented people navigate. Shanti supports LGBTQ and underrepresented professionals in building careers where they can fully and confidently be themselves. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, I've been really looking forward to hearing and learning from you. So we're going to just dive right into it.
Perfect.
So you have shared a pretty sitcom-worthy story about going out at work that I read on your website. It's such a great example of how your personal and professional worlds have shaped you. Would you tell us that story and what year it happened so we just have a little bit of context?
Sure. That was in 2005, and it was after roughly 10 years of having actively hidden my relationship with my now wife at my previous job. So when I knew that I was going to change positions or change companies, I said, okay, this is it. I'm done. I really am tired of the hiding and ducking and weaving and all of the things that I had done during the years of not being forthcoming about the relationship. So I didn't do it the minute I walked through the door, but I knew I was going to do it. And about 6 months in, I said, okay, it's time. And I planned out a couple scenarios of ways that I planned to do it. This particular one, the first time, there were two. The first one was with the sales assistant for the team that I worked with, and really lovely lady. And I honestly hadn't given a ton of thought to how I was going to say it. I was pretty sure that it would just come, the words would come, because why not? I'm used to winging it. I'm a salesperson, right? So she got in there and sat down, and as opposed to what I expected, which was the words would flow really beautifully, and expecting to be able to just communicate pretty basic truths. This is who I am. You are important to me. The team's important to me. I just wanted to share this with you so that you're aware and everyone knows. I started what I've come to describe as an epic ramble spiral, and the words just kept tumbling and they didn't make a lot of sense and they were awkward. And the more it started to spiral, the worse it got. It just went deeper and deeper and deeper. And as I'm doing this, I'm watching her, and her eyes just keep getting bigger and bigger, and I'm rambling and she's not saying anything. And I eventually had the knowledge that this was not going to end well. So I just stopped what I was saying. I looked at her and I said, "It's okay. You can go. Don't worry about it." And she did. And so I really, to this moment, don't know what I said. Somewhere in there, I'm sure she understood what I was trying to communicate, but she laughed, never said a word the entire time. And I just was sitting there with my head in my hands, shaking my head, wondering how that could possibly have gone in such a crazy direction. But there it was. That was my first coming out at work experience.
So was it a bit of a outer body experience? Because you're saying you don't really even remember what you said.
But possibly, I think there was a bit of that to it. It was almost like it was happening and I couldn't stop it. It's just, I didn't, and I realized looking back, I don't think I had a lot of connection to the story or comfort with it, right? I had spent so long keeping everything hidden that I couldn't really access the story and the words very well for myself. And I think that that just became evident in the attempted conversation that I was having.
right? And it's coming out all over again,
Yeah.
you
Yes,
know.
correct. Yeah.
Um, and you mentioned, in your job before this that you hadn't really been
No,
out.
not at all.
And so in that previous job, did you just like dance around the subject a lot, or?
Yeah, danced around it. And just to give some context, the reason that I didn't at the previous job is that it did not feel safe. It wasn't safe. It wasn't that it didn't feel safe. It wasn't safe. I was in media sales in this particular organization. I describe kind of like the Wild West. If you think of Mad Men and that kind of an environment, it was kind of that old school media world and not safe. So, yeah, I danced around it. I've talked about how I would use the they and we pronouns with zero context. So, you might ask me what I did over the weekend, and I would just start talking about, well, we did this, and then they did that. And at no point have I explained who we and they are, and it was awkward because it takes a lot of energy, number one. Who doesn't want to be honest? It's, in my nature, I think it's in everyone's human nature to want to be honest. And at the same time, I had to protect the safety of the situation. So that splitting the difference of using the we, they pronouns with no context was one of the ways that that manifested itself.
Yeah, and I really believe that people who have never had to uh, do that sort of juggling do not understand
Yeah,
how emotionally exhausting it is.
definitely.
You know, and it's because yeah, your mind is just constantly on.
Well, that's what another thing, and some of these realizations, by the way, as I've really paused and made a pivot in my career into my coaching and then into my podcast, these are realizations that I've only had in the past couple of years, even though this relationship with my now wife goes back 30 years. And these kind of days we're talking about unfolded in, let's say, the first, 10 to 15. But I just kind of put my head down and kept moving. I didn't think about it very much. And yes, what you just described, I've come to look back on as a radar that's constantly scanning so that you can assess safety, you can assess what maneuvering may I need to do, what conversations might arise, what answers might I need to have at the ready that I have thought through. And sometimes it's that much in your awareness. And then I think other times it's just running in the background and you're not really necessarily thinking about it or conscious of it, but it's always there. And it is extremely, extremely exhausting.
Yeah, it's one of the things actually that brought me out of the closet, not professionally but personally. Where
Mm,
it's like I was in a relationship, I was living a pretty open life, but yet, I wasn't really out, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and we were having problems, and I was talking to, people who cared about me, and the the pronoun juggling,
Yeah.
finally got, because I was, emotionally hurt, heart hurt, and trying to juggle that. And finally, I just kind of broke down and like, I can't keep having this conversation without
Yes. Yes.
telling you that I'm talking about the man.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, all right. So again, it's like we, to just kind of flow into that. You talked about that extra layer LGBTQ and underrepresented people often carry it vulnerability, that emotional bracing, those moments of feeling misunderstood and hurt. So, can you share how those themes showed up for you and what people who don't face them might be missing?
Yeah. You know, it showed up as me building these walls that I wasn't even fully aware that I was building, but these walls of protection. I definitely made a very clear delineation in my own mind and my own presence between my personal life and my professional life. And that got me through. And then ultimately, and this was also when I switched jobs, that separation showed up early in that next job in a negative way that I am so grateful for because it was very clarifying. I was basically running what I call now leadership by spreadsheet. So rather than heart-led, people-led leadership, it was point A, point B, who's going to do what by when, very tactical leadership, very devoid of humanity or emotion, and didn't really realize that that was what I was. Obviously, I knew I was doing it, but I didn't think about it or the implications of it, and gave very little thought at that time to the human aspect of leadership. I was a young leader. I hadn't had any real leadership training. And then on top of that, if you pile my situation, then this is what it resulted in. And there was someone from my team who I found out pretty early on was looking to potentially leave, was actively looking to get off of my team. And I said, why would they want to leave me? You
Yeah.
know, and but in a very open-minded, curious way, like, what's going on here, seriously? And thinking, okay, you know, I the things that I thought I brought to the table, right? I mean, there's being strategic, there's a certain amount of experience in the field, there's all of these things. And then when I got around to kind and caring, and I was just like this moment of clarity where I said, oh my God, like none of that is showing up. And so it was eye-opening, and I wound up in that situation, pulling that person aside and saying, look, I know you have no reason to believe me, but I want to just explain that I see what's going on. I understand. I have this awareness now of how I've been showing up and how that's probably been impacting you. I'm very sorry. And if you give me a second chance, I vow that things will change from this day forward. And fortunately, it was very sincere. Unfortunately, she sensed the sincerity, I suppose, because she did stay. And we worked together for over 10 years, and it was one of the most rewarding professional relationships I had. But it showed up for me in my professional life as this journey from leadership by spreadsheet and these walls that I had built to over time chiseling away at those. And as you said in the early part of our conversation, focusing a lot more on connection and how to support people on a human level, and what kind of culture did I want to create, and how did we want to show up for each other, and what did we stand for? And that was transformational for me in my work as I started to do that.
Yeah, because when you have to protect so much of yourself,
Right.
right? We want to, and I come from the corporate. I have a corporate background too, as a corporate executive, and there's all of this like, well, you separate the personal and professional,
Right.
and you know, all of this sort of philosophies or cultures and whatever that means at different times, right? Through and in different organizations. But the reality is that it's like, and particularly for those of us in marginalized communities, it's like, well, if we're not showing up as even a little bit of ourselves, we can't really connect with
Right.
and expect, and people sense that.
Oh, yes, people sense it on a very deep level, and that I don't think I said out loud, but to your point, a big part of the chipping away was me being more of myself and being more vulnerable and sharing more. And that's what people respond to. People are people, and that's what they respond to. And when they don't get it, as you said, they they sense it, and it creates divides and suspicion. Everything you don't want to be the basis of what you build as a team. So yeah, it's interesting to look back again more recently and start to really understand what was going on there for me. And I've always known I had been on a journey, but I don't think I fully had thought about the role that being marginalized, underrepresented had played in those moments.
Well, and I do think that's one of the things that people really don't understand. Um, is that because in thinking about our conversation and thinking about the work you do, diving into, learning more about people, I was reflecting a little bit on my career and like early on, and I worked in visual merchandising and in the fashion and retail industry. So you know, and accepting industry.
Yeah.
Uh, but like really early on, I was as a young up and comer, and I was a really shortly after out of college and a really thin uh, gay man, openly gay man, and it's like, and I had this executive who a regional person who would come and visit the store several layers above me, who was known for champion women and gay men, but it's like every time she spoke to me, she talked to me about like she asked me, "Are you okay? Are you well?" And
Mm,
this is in the midst of like the AIDS epidemic, and what she's
mm,
taught. It took me a while, but I finally realized what she was running at was my health
right, right,
because I was a thin gay man.
right. Yeah.
And I don't know all of her intentions, but what I do know is that when it finally dawned on me, it's like I, I mean, I still 20 years later don't know how to process that.
Right. Yeah. Because on one hand, it's very sweet and caring, and on another hand, it's there's a lot of like borders, boundaries, and assumptions and things built into that so that's complex.
Yeah, and it was, and like I said, I to this day, I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
really sure even
Yeah.
how caring that is.
Right. Caring versus almost nosy or yeah.
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 Okay, so speaking of the opposite side of that, so bursting through with allyship being at the heart of bursting through, can you share an example where an allyship made a difference?
Yeah. I'm going to talk about my dad. So when and coming out to my dad and how he responded, which was really just so beautiful. We actually discussed this on the first episode of season 2 of my podcast. And um, I had been in my relationship for a while, probably a year or so, and I just knew kind of in a very inner knowing way that, like it was time to come out at work, that it was time to share with my folks. And I sat him down, and I remember right where we were sitting. He has a beautiful home, and we were sitting in front of his fireplace. And we had had conversations in the past, and I had asked him, Dad, how do you know for sure when you're in love? And he said, you know for sure because you know for sure. He said, there's no doubt. And if you have to ask, then you're not in love. And I said, okay. And I was in a relationship at the time with someone else. And I was thinking, okay, that's not a good sign because I'm asking the question. So then all these years later, I sat him down and I said, well, this, first of all, felt like jumping off of a cliff, if I had to describe it. So I had no real thought that he was going to freak out or disown me or anything dramatic, yet it was so difficult to get the words to come out. So I stood on the edge of this proverbial cliff and just said, okay, let's do this. Let's go for it. And I said, do you know how I asked you before? How do you know when you're in love? And you said, and he said, yep, I remember the whole conversation. I said, well, I'm in love and there's no doubt, and I'm extremely happy. And then I told him who I was in love with. And I know how he responded, which was wonderfully, but in this interview that I did with him, this is what he described. He said that everything about parenting kicked in for him at that moment. And what he meant specifically was, while his parents were wonderful humans, they married very young, they made a lot of mistakes, not meaning to, that sort of thing, but mistakes nonetheless. And each time they made a mistake with him, he said, I vow when I'm a parent someday to not repeat these mistakes. And all that I will care about is that my kid is happy. And that's it. Everything else comes after that. So what he's described is that in that moment, that is exactly what surfaced for him was this deep knowing that all that mattered was that I was happy, and he could tell I was. He knew my now wife, and felt good about her, and that was it. That doesn't mean he didn't have some shifting to do because now his whole reality has shifted, and that's very real. So there's a minute to process, but he virtually didn't skip a beat, and it was just about being an ally in the sense of if I'm happy, he's happy, and it's that simple.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah,
beautiful.
thank you. Yeah, he's a special guy.
And we're getting close to the end of our conversation, and I'm going to process that beautiful. We always close with hope and action.
Yeah.
So, what are three concrete things allies can do to make the journey easier and better for their underrepresented?
Yeah. So one of the things, and this has again been a theme on the podcast that's come up in a variety of ways, is, and I'll say this too, while I'm obviously in an underrepresented community, um, there are also moments of allyship where I could step in for someone else. And I had noticed even in myself this hesitation to, oof, am I going to do the right thing? Am I going to say the right thing? So this kind of laying back that I would do at times, and I think one of the best things that people can do is realize that you don't need to understand everything that's going on in a given situation. You don't have to have all the answers. The most important thing, though, is to, when you know, and you know on a gut level, that your presence would be beneficial, that it would be helpful and supportive for you to step in the ring at that moment, to just step in the ring and not, this isn't a moment to feel like you need to be perfect or have all the answers. But if you follow that call and you do it with an open heart and with sincerity, and you may even say, I might not say all of the right things, but I know that something needs to be said. But that stepping in when you know that you feel that it's the right thing to do is critical. A theme that came up on the podcast, it was one of the most beautiful moments, but there was a white gentleman who has actually made a film about the Black community in Omaha, and in doing so was forming these relationships, and being an ally, and also realizing, you know, am I going to be fully welcome in these spaces? And the person that he was working with, the activist in the Black community, his response to that question, because the question was asked, is that shared experiences change the world. So the gentleman was saying, we don't know each other that well yet, but if we're going to have a chance to overcome and really come together, it's about getting in spaces together and having real conversations in real life. So I think that concept of shared experiences and participating at that kind of a level is very important. And the last is a separate point that was made on the podcast, but it was, recognizing when you're in a position of privilege, whatever that might be in a given moment, and then doing the math in a room that doing the math in the room that you're in, and having the awareness of who may be in the minority, who might be drowned out in a conversation, and being prepared, go back to step one, to jump in if need be. But there's something that I think was a really brilliant, simple point about doing the math in the room.
Yeah, those are three really powerful and actionable, and so you know they're so simple, but yet so complicated if you've never thought of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But
Yeah. And I do feel that it's been interesting as I've been thinking about these questions more, in the work that I do and in preparing for our conversation, that some of the most profound answers are the simplest ones, and the ones that really reconnect us on a human level. So,
yeah, and the like bursting through has taught me so much. Just like asking other people questions has, yeah, I guess I always knew it would, but somehow it surprised me.
yeah,
Um, that, and like really super early on when I started doing this work through the allyship, that it's like, I realized that, well, we're all allies to each other within within the marginal communities.
yeah,
It's important for us to support one another, and that
right,
doesn't, and not, create, great competition between who's, more marginalized, although that
right,
can be, that's real. Uh, uh, and there's a lot of intersectionality, but also now, like, I'm really kind of thinking about your last one, was like recognize your privilege. Like, I know how I look,
right.
you know, and present. And it took me a long time to understand that privilege because all I ever saw was a
Right.
gay
Yes.
kid when I lived, and you know, and so it's like, taking that, you know, your privilege, whatever.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And for me too. I mean, there's plenty of situations in which I am privileged as much as we talk about being underrepresented, right? And so, yeah, I think it's very interesting. And I do think that, like you said, there are obviously levels of marginalization that are very real. And the reason I do the work I do, the reason I did the podcast is in there somewhere, I think, is a shared experience of being on the outside and what that feels like. And that there is an opportunity for us all to support each other even more in that space in the middle there, that sweet spot.
Yeah, 100%. Those that interconnectivity and cross sectionality, and and through, like, with your work and with mine too, it's like, I've uncovered so many of those threads
Yes.
that I
Yes.
guess on some level I knew were there, but to uncover them is
Yeah.
a whole nother, and then to be able to talk about them,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
and and is so important, because it's like, at the end of the day, we're just here to be the best versions.
Right. Exactly right. Yes. Well said.
So I have learned so much from you, and I
Thank
love
you.
how your journey has, uncovered so many things that you now share with others, and it has been such a privilege to have you here and to learn
Thank
from you.
Thank you. And thank you for the work that you're doing and supporting these conversations and allyship. It's so important, and tremendous amount of respect for what you're doing.
Well, thank you, and you and I are going to keep doing this kind of work, right?
Excellent.
Yeah. So you have been listening to Bursting. If this conversation moved you, share it, because our conversations are just the beginning. What really matters is how our actions create change. And if you're ready to take action, join the movement at Bursting Through Dots. Remember, allyship is not a moment, it's a movement. Together, we are bursting through.